Mullavikal is a day we remember the hardest, saddest time in the history of Tamils in Sri Lanka. Every Tamil-speaking person across the world looks back at the criminal acts of the Sri Lankan armed forces and the Rajapaksa government's genocide policy. And of course, the suffering didn't end that day 9 years ago. It's continued with the prison camps, the disappeared thousands and torture. And still today with the land grab and military occupation, the denial of the right to Tamil self-determination, the complete failure to provide decent housing, health, education, jobs, and there's still no investigation into war crimes. There is a lot to remember, a lot to remind the world of on Mullavikal Day. But it's also a chance to look at where we are today and discuss how things can change, how we can make them change. So while we remember the past, we also fight for the future. Tamil solidarity has never stopped fighting for the right to self-determination, for the right of Tamil Muslims to live free from attacks from right-wing nationalist groups, for an end to discrimination against upcountry people, and for the right of all workers and oppressed people in Sri Lanka, no matter what their ethnic or religious background. Many people watching this series of broadcasts know that Tamil solidarity puts our cards on the table. We say it as we see it and invite others to do the same. Tamil solidarity believes this kind of open approach is needed in order to work out the best way forward for the struggle for Tamil rights. And if we look at the last 9 years, we must recognise that Tamil-speaking people have been let down, badly let down, by major world and regional powers, by the political establishments in Sri Lanka and in Britain, by the United Nations and other agencies, badly let down time and time again. Tamil Solidarity has warned about this over the last 9 years. If we look at the United Nations for a moment, we all know that back in 2009 it proved powerless to do anything against the Sri Lankan army. In fact, it withdrew its people. Then hopes were raised by some in the Tamil movement that United Nations resolutions were the solution. And the United Nations did criticise the Rajapaksa regime over war crimes and made some recommendations. But what has come of it? This year, at the United Nations Human Rights Council, Sri Lanka barely got a mention. It's out of the news and off the agenda. Just ask any Palestinian person or any Kurdish person what they've gained over decades of UN talk. It's absolutely outrageous. And why is it? It's because the US, China, Britain, India, Pakistan and so on are all competing to do business and infrastructure deals with the government of Sri Lanka. It's not in their interests to take action. The result is that Tamil rights are thrown out the window. We could say about Chogam, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. A few years ago, David Cameron put on a show for TV and for Tamil votes in Britain when Chogam took place in Sri Lanka. But Cameron on camera gave nothing to the Tamils. And this year's Chogam in London, Sirisena was wined and dined, made speeches in front of business leaders as though nothing had happened, not a mention of the land grab, the political prisoners or the war crimes. Yet it seems that time and time again, the only strategy offered to Tamil-speaking people is to beg for help from the establishment politicians, whether that is in the Sri Lankan Parliament or in top-table talks with Tories, Liberals or Blairite Labour. Tamil Solidarity says there's a need for a rethink. The big business agenda of these politicians towards Sri Lanka is the same as their big business agenda in Britain. Just as they do not fight for the Tamil rights or the rights of working class and poor people throughout Sri Lanka, so in Britain, their policies of cutting council services, privatising education, raising tuition fees, raising rents, freezing pay, forcing people onto 0-hour contracts hit the poorest communities the hardest, and that includes most Tamil-speaking people. Look at the way they treat Tamil refugees, thrown into detention centres without the right to work. We will get nothing from these rotten political establishment. That's one reason Tamil Solidarity welcomed Jeremy Corbyn's rise to the Labour leader, because he has stood against this austerity programme, stood against Tony Blair's war in Iraq, for the rights of Palestinians and Kurds, and also for the rights of Tamil-speaking people when they rule unpopular policies. Tamil Solidarity has always said, and on Mullavidgul Day this year we will say it again, that the Tamil-speaking people must stand with our natural allies, the workers and young people fighting for workers' rights, for decent pay and for free education in Britain, with workers' trade unions throughout, who organise 6 million people in Britain, with Palestinians and Kurds and other oppressed people, fighting alongside the Refugee Rights Campaign, because these are our natural allies. Together we can build a movement to fight for our rights. On Mullavidgul Day, we have a duty to mourn and to remember the terrible events of 2009. We must also learn from the past and look to the future. Remember the dead and fight for the living.